Hi, I want to talk about how my experiences in the gay community have changed as a result of my transition. I mean, now still, and even pre-T, the gay community was important in my life. I mean, it really provided this place that I felt, comfortable to be in, and obviously comfortable to be myself. And the role that's played for me has slightly shifted in my transition, and I've kind of, weaved in and out of it several times, but I find it fascinating that how I interact with and my place in the LGBT community, how it still is changing. And it's also good to know that I do still have a place there, because I have seen videos from the other guys have made, and also from people that have talked to me about it in person, about how they're concerned about no longer being a part of that community, especially the lesbian community, obviously, because a lot of guys who transitioned pre-T, they were by technicality a lesbian if they were interested in females. And I too, that's how I was categorized, and I guess that's how I identified, just through technicality, because that's what I was. I mean, I never felt that comfortable using the term lesbian, but as I understood it, I was female and I was interested in females, so it kind of just slots in like that. But yeah, I have talked about this before, I think, but I did feel very comfortable in the lesbian community. And when thinking about transition, I mean, I wanted to transition. I didn't see myself as female. I didn't want to be stuck as being female, because I knew that I wouldn't be able to live happily that way. But I also didn't want to, I was having a hard time being able to let go of how good I had it. If you look at it from an impersonal perspective, yeah, it was good. I mean, I was comfortable there, I had lots of friends there, I was very accepted, I felt like I was attractive, and I felt wanted. But ultimately, that's not worth what I was going through if I was not to transition. And so, as I began to go on T, I was more comfortable with my identity as a male, and because transitioning, being male and interested in females, that would make me straight. And it wasn't that so much that made me start to feel excluded, because I knew that I did have a place there. I mean, it's LGBT, right? But more specifically, I didn't really have a place in the lesbian community, because I was no longer a lesbian. So, I mean, I still had and have lots of friends who are lesbians, so I would still be in those spaces, and it's not that I felt unwelcome, but more specifically, I felt invisible, which was really interesting, because for a lot of my life it had been the opposite, because I was androgynous, and when I was in non-LGBT spaces, people would stare and things like that, as they do with anybody who they perceive to be slightly different. And at one point I had pretty out there colourful hair, so that obviously attracts more attention too, and that wasn't my intention, but I kind of just got used to the fact that that's just something that happens. And yeah, so then to become invisible, it was interesting, and also at first kind of a relief. And then I started to get this feeling of, I'm pretty much an outsider here. I'm here with my friends, but I don't really play a role in this. I don't really have a place here other than just kind of going along with other people. I mean, I don't fit in there anymore, so to speak. That being said, when I go out to lesbian spaces now, I feel more comfortable than I did at one point in my transition, because I understand that I can still, you know, have lesbian friends and have fun and be comfortable and be close with people in that kind of environment, but it's just not the same kind of involvement that was there before. And I kind of had to accept that this place that had been such like a, you know, a good place for me was no longer really relevant to me. And it was interesting that pre-T and even up until very recently in my transition, gay male spaces were, I felt like they were completely irrelevant to me. Part of it was that a lot of the time when I went to these spaces, I was with people who weren't gay males anyway, like I was with lesbian friends or something, so I felt like that outsider thing that I now feel being in lesbian spaces, except it's a little bit different because gay male spaces were much more unfamiliar to me. So I felt like a stranger because essentially I was. But as I started to kind of discover my bisexuality, I slowly started, you know, easing back into the LGBT environment in the way that, even if it's only psychologically, I understood that now it was still relevant to me and I still do have a place there. I mean, I understand that as a trans person, you know, again, LGBT, I do have a place in those spaces, but is just this feeling of that it's not as relevant in the way that, you know, the other LGB, those are sexualities, and T, that's not a sexuality, so it's kind of got a different way of blending in with things. And I should make another video about how I feel there's a separation between LGB and T, in the way that they have some things in common, for example, the activist elements and, you know, fighting for equal rights, but I won't go too far into it. What I did notice was that when I went to LGBT spaces that were mixed and that were not only welcoming but designed for both guys and girls of whatever sexuality, I felt comfortable there. It was only when I was in only lesbian or only gay male spaces that I felt excluded. So maybe that was just an implication that I was looking in the wrong places. And as I started to discover these mixed environments, I started to feel more comfortable again and feel like, you know, there is still something there for me, and I do still like being in these environments. And then as I explored my attraction to guys more, I started going to some events that weren't the typical clubbing on Oxford Street, you know, dance party, whatever. And then that's when I started to feel like I was actually around people that I had things in common with, which was a pretty amazing feeling for me, because I thought that, well, I don't know how much I truly believed it, but I just had this feeling that, you know, I wouldn't really truly be able to fit in gay male spaces just because of my history and just this inherent disconnect that I felt, even if it wasn't warranted. But yeah, I pretty much realized that it was only because I had a much narrower idea of what kind of LGBT spaces are out there for me. So once I kind of explored that a bit more, I realized that, you know, there is, obviously everybody know, or should know, there isn't one type of lesbian or one type of gay guy, but a lot of the events that are available for people kind of catered to a very specific thing, and I had that extra time pre-transition to find those lesbian spaces that weren't just the, you know, go out clubbing or whatever spaces, but I hadn't had that time to find those environments on the, you know, male end of things. So now that that's actually happening, I'm feeling like this sense of, you know, feeling like I do have a role, and I do fit in those spaces, and also to be able to get attention in those environments is not only flattering, but just like very just reaffirming of my identity and my validity as a male. Not that I require that affirmation from others, but it just makes you feel so much better. So I mean, it's been very comforting being able to explore that and being able to feel like there's a whole side of the gay community that I have yet to discover. And it's just interesting that it turns out this way, because it was something that I was so worried about pre-T. And that being said, you know, I am not really a part of lesbian communities in the same way that I was before, of course, because I'm not a lesbian, but it's just interesting the way that I found like a new place in the gay community, and that it's still a part of my life. Anyway, I think that's all that I will say about it for now. It's a very broad topic, so I may or may not have more to add at another time, but yeah, hopefully that's interesting for people to see, and that, you know, you can really still be a part of the gay community if you want to be, just because you've transitioned. And even if you don't end up having a sexuality which would define you as gay after you transition, even if you transition and you're a straight male, I mean, it doesn't mean that you have to exclude yourself from these spaces. Although I imagine it will be slightly different in that situation. But, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to explore in there, and I'm just finding it exciting. So, I'm gonna stop now, and I'll see you guys soon. I think I've got some update videos to make, so I'll get on to that eventually. Okay, bye.